Hello, Brian Hampton here at the Christian Service Center for Central Florida. I am the Development and Communications Director at the Christian Service Center, and I want to welcome you to the next episode of Putting Faith into Action, a virtual series all about the idea of Christian service. Today's guest is City Commissioner Robert Stuart. To me, he is just Robert, though. You see, for 25 years, Robert Stuart was the Executive Director here at the Christian Service Center. He's recently retired from that role, but he still continues to serve the city as he's done for well over a dozen years as commissioner. And I don't know how he does it, but I think his lifetime commitment to his neighbors and his passion for his neighbors and the city that he lives in and grew up in really does kind of steer his life of service. So I hope you enjoy what Robert has to say, and stick around afterward because our current executive director, Eric, is going to share some real and practical ways that you can get involved and serve your community. Thank you.
Good morning or afternoon. My name is Robert Stuart. I am the former executive director of the Christian Service Center, now serving also as a city commissioner for the city of Orlando. I've been asked by Eric and Brian to share a few words about service, about what community service means, but more importantly, about how you may want to be engaged. So to do that story, I need to go back a few years to kind of give you a little bit of a background. So let me start with this that's most important. I'm born and raised here in Orlando, Florida, born and raised really in the College Park area. Have been involved here, well, more than 67 years, if you can imagine that. Come from a big family. My father had a business downtown, was very successful. We had an opportunity to be engaged in that at a very early age. But my father came out of was a sharecropper, if you want to call it that, in Georgia, and moved down here many years ago. Had helped care for his family while his family was going through tuberculosis as a crisis in the 20s and 30s. Ended up settling here in Orlando and began his business and was very successful. What he taught us and my mom together taught us that part of your commitment to our community, part of a commitment to things around you is service. It's a service of a chance to give back. My dad used to often say that if you run a business, the business gives. You get so much out of the business, you have an obligation to give back to the community. And so we were brought up in that kind of what would be today called corporate entrepreneurial system. We knew what was important. We knew why it was important, and important to give back. And so during my entire life, I've been engaged in those types of things and engaged in evangelistic outreach, engaged in civic clubs, engaged in my church for many years. But more importantly, took the leadership role. In fact, I got engaged as a board member at the Christian Service Center in, I guess, 1988 or so, and was slated to be the president of the Christian Service Center. And when we moved our executive director out, they asked me if I would consider being executive director. And after much prayer, and I agreed to accomplish that, and then served there for 25 years as executive director. So I feel like in my life, serving is just kind of second nature. It's what you do in being engaged in the work that you do. I also believe that in leadership, leadership is servant leadership. And there's a great book called Jesus on Servant Leadership and Jesus on Leadership. And it talks about Jesus' role as a servant leader and what it meant for him and the example he gave us. I was just listening to a podcast a couple of days ago, and it reminded me of Jesus cleaning the feet of his disciples. His dirty, ugly, dusty feet. He sat down and did that in the middle of the Last Supper as one of his last acts of giving. So giving is part of what we do. I got involved with the Christian Service Center, like I said, as a board member, then became executive director. And I will tell you, over the course of 25 years, I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands, of people, specifically about service, about how to get engaged, about what you can do in terms of getting engaged. And so what I want to do is share just a little bit of that. Now, the Christian Service Center starts in 1971, really as a way to us to reach out and touch the lives of those in our community who needed help. The world was coming to Orlando, Florida, after 1968, when they began construction with the Walt Disney World, and they got here to and tried to get their pot of gold, and they found out it wasn't quite as easy as people thought, and so that led to the next thing of them looking for help. And the only social service system in the community was really the churches, and the churches joined together in downtown to serve those people that came to their doorsteps. The Christian Service Center was that extension of that service, and we do it because of because I consider myself still part of the family. We do it because that's what God calls us to do. Now, when you go back and look at the scriptural references that we have, I think what you want to do is you want to look at what Christ has called us to do. Now, literally in his last days on earth here, Christ would turn to his disciples and say, look, I know that people want to know who you are and who you belong to. And I want to tell you, here's how it happens. You belong to me, and the evidence of that is how you love one another. Now, the word love here that Jesus uses isn't the word of eros. It's the word of philios. It is the word of loving your brother. It's an action word. It's not an emotion word. And it's not the same word he uses in terms of agape, which is unselfish love. It is the kin to unselfish love, and it's that kind of way for us to connect in giving to one another. So he says, look, I want you to give of yourselves to one another. I want you to love. Now, I will tell you that serving, at least in my mind, serving is an act of love. It is the act of love, not just because you love one another and you want to help. It's the act of love, showing love in what Christ has done in your life. It's the act of showing love in gratitude for how your life is. So when you begin to look at the types of ways that you can give, there's hundreds of them. Oftentimes, if you've heard me speak and been kind of one-on-one with me, you've heard me say that we as Christians believe that giving is part of that. We come out of a Judeo-Christian background, and the Jewish faith believes exactly the same thing, that it is our task, it is our calling to give. And we oftentimes break some of that tradition, and we create this idea that Christianity is just what it is. It's not. It to me, it is to do something. It's to go beyond yourself. It's to look greater than yourself. It's to be the servant that Christ has called us to be. I don't know of any better way to do that than to look at places like the Christian Service Center to give of yourself. Now, like I said, if you've heard me speak before, you've heard me say that you, as a Christian, you have a lot of choices ahead of you. As a Christian, you can choose who you want to associate with. You can choose what church you want to go to. You can choose how you want to live your life. But there's one choice you don't have as a Christian, and that's the choice of serving one another. Because you're called to love. You're called to serve. You're called to go do those things. In the early church, service meant to go gather the orphans, gather those that were abandoned by traditional Roman. The Roman society would abandon those children and who either weren't male or they weren't healthy as they would think they should be. They would abandon them. They would gather them up and they would take them into their homes because that's what they were called to do. They were called to care for one another. Caring comes today in all kinds of ways. It comes in making a phone call. It comes in praying for people. It comes in just showing what you love and how you love one another. But like I said, you don't have a choice not to do that. You can't be a Christian and be a hermit and sit around and tell people that you're a Christian. Because that's not what Christianity is. That's not what faith is. That's not what any of the major faiths that we deal with are. They're designed not to so much proselytize to bring more people in. They're designed to love and attract people. I've heard said, and I've said before, that Christianity is a faith of attraction. And you attract people by how you care for one another. During my work at the Christian Service Center, I've had hundreds of groups, thousands of people, and asked them to come and get engaged, to find a way they can get engaged in the work that we do. But I will tell you that there are many ways to get engaged in our community. One of those is the Christian Service Center, and whether you want to do something as simple as serving daily bread to something as elaborate or as tasking as doing lawn work or maybe delivering food to our schools with a love pantry. Maybe it's writing a note of encouragement to somebody on the staff to tell them that you appreciate what they do. But those things you can do today, and you ought to be doing them. And I think once you begin, like Christ said, once you begin to think about other people, you kind of lose yourself. You begin to see what you can do. I will tell you that one of the needs I had for many years was to look for those people who had special talents in marketing or advertising or finance or accounting, and say, look, you have a talent and you don't have to go just do daily bread, although that's very important. Now, you don't have to go do these other tasks, although they're each very important. But you have been given a gift, and you can share that gift specifically with people. I'm so honored to be here to share with you about this. I'm so honored to be part of the Christian Service Center family. I'm honored that Eric and Brian would think of me to kind of help kick off this virtual series. But most importantly, I want to challenge you. Challenge you, as if you're listening and watching this, you need to share your faith. You need to go and do that by acts of service, acts of kindness, acts of love. And you can do that in hundreds of ways throughout our community. Christian Service Center is one. But like I've told people for years, you can choose where you want to serve, but you don't have a choice of whether you serve or not. You serve because that's what Christ calls us to do. I'm so honored to be part of this. Thank you so much for letting me be part of it. Look forward to a long tenure with Eric and the continued growth of the work of the Christian Service Center. Thanks a lot.
I want to thank Commissioner Stuart for joining us and for sharing his thoughts. He's an amazing man. He also was my predecessor at the Christian Service Center and worked with us for 25 years and just recently retired. He's what we like to call a two-sport athlete. He's the Bo Jackson of public service, both a public servant at the city of Orlando as a commissioner and the full-time job that it takes there, as well as he had been a full-time director for our program as an agency director for a nonprofit, and that's very difficult to do. So we're really appreciative of him taking the time to participate. Want to recommend a couple of other things for you to consider in terms of service. Another book for you to consider, 10 Power Principles of Christian Service by Warren and David Wiersbe. This is a pretty good book, worth reading, I think. And even though the book was written for pastors and people serving in the ministry, I think many people would benefit from the contents. Each chapter begins with the heart of a pastor in a story-like setting of emotion and frustration. The problems are identified, and there's a scripture-based solution identified in each section. These are the 10 most common frustrations in the ministry that they list out. And if you're new to the ministry or you're just worn out from serving, I recommend you picking up this book. I think you'll really appreciate it and enjoy it. So 10 Power Principles for Christian Service. A couple of other ways you can volunteer. One would be
volunteering in your city. Most people don't think about volunteering in the municipality in which they live, but there's actually a lot of volunteer opportunities within most cities, both large and small. Many cities have organized neighborhood watch programs at their simplest, but there's also a lot of youth programs that rely very heavily on volunteers. You can invest your experience and knowledge in mentoring a child. You could grab a whistle and guide a group of kids on the field as a youth football coach. You can support a community center event during the holidays, senior nights, or even tournaments at the community centers. You can guide youth in a STEM program, and a lot of cities are organizing robotics teams as well. So a lot of opportunities for you to participate. There are all examples that we have right here in Orlando, and you can learn about them on our website here at the orlando.gov, but they're not limited to the City Beautiful. There's a lot of places all over the country where you can volunteer within your organized city municipality. We have a lot of opportunities for people to serve in public service as elected officials. You just have to make the decision to run for office. And our democracy is really dependent upon those people making the decision to run for office. Today, 40% of state legislative races go uncontested, and the problem is worse even at the local level. So there's a crisis of leadership occurring in our democracy. We need more people to lead. We need more people to run for office, and there's a great website called runforoffice.org. This is a free service that provides all the tools you need to launch a successful campaign, whether you are a seasoned veteran or a first-time campaigner. Run for Office allows you to find the office you want to run for, get the information you need to appear on the ballot, learn how to run for office, and get a free voter file even from this service. So launch your campaign through runforoffice.org. And then out of respect for Commissioner Stuart, wanted to highlight another unique volunteer opportunity, that's being an umpire. Aside from calling balls and strikes or safe and out, umpires are responsible for teaching players good sportsmanship and the rules of the game. Umpires are also called upon to interpret rules and help settle minor disputes that may occur during games. Most Little League games have one home plate umpire and a minimum of one field umpire. And before becoming a home plate umpire, you may be required to participate in some training sessions. Really encourage you to look up about the possibility of becoming a Little League umpire at littleleague.org. It's a great website. You can learn about lots of different volunteer opportunities through your local and active Little League programs. And then finally, want to encourage you to consider service right here at the Christian Service Center. Volunteerism here at the Christian Service Center is something that we hold very dear, and we want you to look us up at christianservicecenter.org anytime. You can help serve food at one of our 3 campuses, including right here in downtown Orlando. It's simple. You can come on your own, or you can come with a group. And finally, we also have an upcoming program called Feed the Need, which we do annually during the 2nd week of October. This is a free event where we share the mission and vision for our organization. We want to give guests who come to this free luncheon an opportunity to support us financially at the end of the 1-hour program. If you're new to our mission, you can sign up as a guest and join us that way, or if you are familiar with our work, we want you to consider joining us as a table host and inviting a few of your friends and colleagues. The event will once again be held at the Dub's Dread Tap Room right here in the College Park neighborhood of Orlando. Hope you've been inspired to think a little bit more deeply and passionately about Christian service. We thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.